right. Hey guys, those of you that are at home quarantined or my remote learners, we're back at it today after Thanksgiving break, and we've got 3 weeks until Christmas break. So, looking at our agenda today, we're going to do the get ready and the read or partial read. We're going to start on it for the seventh man. We have paired selections. If you look at the agenda for this week, we're reading two selections, and you'll be tested over that a week from today if we stay on schedule, which I expect that we will. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started on the Get Ready page. I was just talking to my class about how most of the terms that you need to know that you're going to see on the unit test and on the 6 weeks test, and these are your TEKS, the things that you're supposed to be learning for 10th grade English. Most of those appear in your Get Ready page. So we're just going to mark that up a little bit today. Remember that annotating is your friend, so take notes. And I just wanted to remind you that when I go to grade things, which I grade pretty much everything that you write, I look at it individually. I don't look to see if you marked it as done. I go in here to look at it. And so I click on to review, and let's say I clicked on first period and click on Aaron. Well, I can see all of his annotations for the entire unit. So he's made 35 annotations. And his last annotation, I can just scroll down and I see it was on November 30th at 8:37, 8:37, 8:37. That's today. This morning when he was in first period, he was doing his work. So that shows me what time you did it and what you did. And so sometimes I'll open up somebody's notes on the side and I'll go, wait a minute, this kid hasn't done anything, hasn't made a note since October 5th. So if I look at that and see that you haven't made a note, or everybody else has 35 or 40 notes and you have 12, then I know for sure that you're not doing your work. And then I can, check it more specifically. But this is a quick way for me to see what you're doing. And of course, you don't have to do just the notes that I give you. You can do anything to help you mark up or annotate the text to understand it better. Okay, so that's just a reminder. So our essential question for this unit, and we are on unit 3, called the natural world. So it's all about nature, and the specific question is what effect do we have on nature, and how does nature affect us? So when you go back and do that, what do we call it? The response log. You're going to be thinking about each of these selections that we've read and how it relates to this essential question. So since we're doing a paired passage here, we're going to be comparing themes. As you read, notice how the authors working in 2 different genres address similar themes. Always pay attention to the genre focus. So I just highlighted short story over here if y'all want to just follow along with me, because that is our genre focus. I'm not going to read this because you all know the short story is the genre that you were first introduced to, from the time you were born, pretty much, short stories. So you can read over that if you need to. We do have a quick start, so let's look at it. In the 1930s, President Franklin Roosevelt, so 1930s, let's look at the historical time frame. We're talking about Great Depression era. He told the American people in this famous speech, and I've seen video of it, and you probably have too. You may not remember it right off the bat, but he says, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. What do you think he meant by that? And remember, this quick start relates to the story in some way, so we want to make a connection to the story ahead of time. What do you think he meant by the only thing we have to fear is fear itself? And do you agree? Why or why not? It says share with a partner, but I just want you to highlight any part of that paragraph and answer the question in a note. Do you agree, and why or why not? I'm going to pause for a second. All right, let's continue. So you've done your quick start. Now let's look at some of the terms that you need to know while you're reading these 2 selections. I did create a Quizlet set, so I'll have you join my Quizlet class sometime later this week. We'll play Quizlet live with these terms and be tested over these terms, because I want to make sure that you're learning and retaining these terms that you need to know for 10th grade English. So this is review. A symbol is a person, place, or object or activity that stands for something beyond itself. In our culture, we have some common symbols such as doves might symbolize peace, like a white dove. Red roses many times symbolize love, and flags symbolize countries, and then the stars or the stripes or the symbols on the flags represent something else as well. Writers can use these symbols to make connections among ideas without stating them explicitly. Explicitly means like detailing it and coming right out and saying what they mean. They can use a symbol instead. So here's your next term, which may be a new term for you. So go ahead and highlight this definition. In a text, a recurring symbol that makes up a pattern is called a motif. A motif. So for instance, if during a story that mainly takes place outside in nature, in the woods or whatever, if someone keeps seeing a white wolf emerge from the woods and it kind of stares at them and just stands there, that white wolf is probably a symbol. And since it appears over and over in the story, it's probably a motif of some type, okay? A motif can reveal an underlying theme. So you might want to highlight that, but you know what a theme is. A theme is the underlying message about life or human nature that the writer wants to communicate. So we have symbols, repeated symbols become a motif, and both symbols and motifs help us to understand the theme that the author is trying to get us to understand without necessarily coming right out and saying it. So all of these things in the get ready, just keep in mind that it's getting us ready to read The Seventh Man. So we're going to be looking for examples of symbols and motifs and the theme of the story as we read. We'll also figure out why they ask us this question for the quick start and how that relates to the story, and also how it relates to the overall essential question. You'll be coming back to this chart and see what the wave or the sea symbolizes, what the typhoon symbolizes or might represent, and Kay's paintings. We don't even know who Kay is or what that means right now, but you'll be coming back to this later, and when I get ready to grade this Get Ready page, I'll be looking for that you annotated what I asked you to annotate, that you did the quick start, and that you completed this chart. We'll also be analyzing the plot. Since this is a short story, one of the characteristics of a short story is that it has a plot that's developed around characters and conflict. So oftentimes stories are told in chronological order. They start at the beginning and they continue until it gets to the end of whatever the story is you're wanting to tell. But not all stories are linear, or sometimes within a linear plot, an author can use other effects like flashbacks, and you know what that is. It kind of self-explanatory. It flashes back to another time. And that interrupts the chronological flow of the story, and The Seventh Man is structured as a frame story. So this was a new term for me, and it might be a new term for you as well. I know what it is, but I've never heard it called that before. So go ahead and highlight this. A frame story is a story that's structured in which a present-day narrator relates the main story, which happens in the past, and then they return to the present day. So this already gives us a big clue about the story, because they're telling us that it is a frame story. It starts in the present day with a narrator, but it flashes back to an earlier time, and the main story happens in the past, and then it comes back to the present. And so that should be a very familiar structure to you. A lot of movies and TV series are structured that way. We start with a crime at the beginning of the movie, a crime scene. And then it flashes back and we get all of these clues through flashbacks of what actually happened. Or maybe it starts at the scene of the crime or the scene of the accident, and then it goes back. And sometimes it'll even say on a movie or a TV show, it'll even say 3 days earlier or 2 weeks earlier, or maybe even 7 years earlier. And then it tells us the story till we get back to that accident or crime scene. and we go, okay, now we know why they're there and what happened. And you can unravel once you've read the whole thing, then you can put it all in chronological order and say, okay, this is the series of events that happened, but the author kind of scrambled them up out of order. So as you read The Seventh Man, think about how each plot event affects the plot as a whole. Where does it take us? How does it progress the story? Now you're going to do the critical vocabulary. You do not have to type in or paste in definitions for all of these, but you will need to look them up and just make sure you're familiar with these, and I think you'll know a lot of them. Frail, premonition, entranced, permeate, delirium, sentiment, sociable, and reconciliation. So you'll want to look those words up, make sure you know what they all mean, and then I wanted you to see that you have 2 pages for your fill in the blank. We only usually have 1, but you have more this time. So make sure that you click through, do the fill in the blank, and check it. So when I come and look at this, I will see that you did it, and it'll show me, the first time you did it, how many you missed. And I don't really count off for that, except maybe if I saw that on both pages you missed them all or missed most of them and you never corrected it, then I might not give you full credit for it. I recommend that if you think you got it right and it's still telling you it's wrong, to just reset the whole thing with this refresh button and then start over and then check it again. All right, I'm going to give you about 10 minutes. Those of you that are in class right now, I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to do this. I'm going to pause the video, and then we're going to come back and read the first part of The Seventh Man. All right, you should have gotten your critical vocabulary done, those 2 pages of it. There's 8, and you should have checked those. Let's move on. We'll talk about complex sentences later on, but that is on your Get Ready page too. You don't have to do anything to it. Let's go to the story itself. And I've already got some annotations made here because I've done it with my other classes. So I'll just be pointing out to you what we did. So one of your annotation strategies is to start with the title and ask yourself some questions. And I know you probably did this in Miss Edwards' class last year if you were here. The Seventh Man. That's sort of an odd title. So I asked myself, who is the seventh man? And why is he called that, the seventh man, instead of a name? So what is the significance of calling him the seventh man? All right. We do want to look at the background of the author. As a boy, Haruki Murakami preferred reading American paperbacks to studying traditional Japanese literature. He went on to become a novelist and a short story writer known for his unique and whimsical works. I thought that was an important word when we're trying to understand the story. If we know what kind of literature, what kind of stories the author writes, that might give us some clues to what's going on. Is this real or is it figurative? Is it fantasy? So it says Murakami combines mystery, comedy, and fantasy in his work while keeping his message practical, profound, and believable. And when you see that I've highlighted something, if I don't tell you to take a note, it's just a highlight there, just to kind of point it out. As you read the author's vivid descriptions and figurative language, so they're giving us a clue that not everything in here is meant to be taken literally. He's using a lot of figurative language. It might help to create mental images of the story in your mind. Really think about it. That's what a good story does. It creates mental images for us. Keep in mind that this is set in his home country of Japan. So think about that setting as you're imagining it. Now we're just going to read down to the first section. Read the first section down to the first question, and you don't have to do the annotating now. We'll do it after we finish that section. A huge wave nearly swept me away, said the seventh man, almost whispering. Again, I'm wondering who the seventh man is and why he's called the seventh man. It happened one September afternoon when I was 10 years old. The man was the last one to tell his story that night. The hands of the clock had moved past 10. The small group that huddled in a circle could hear the wind tearing through the darkness outside, heading west. It shook the trees, set the windows to rattling, and moved past the house with one final whistle. It was the biggest wave I had ever seen in my life, he said. A strange wave, an absolute giant. He paused. It just barely missed me, but in my place, it swallowed everything that mattered most to me and swept it off to another world. It took me years to find it again, to recover from the experience. Precious years that can never be replaced. The seventh man appeared to be in his mid-50s. He was a thin man, tall, with a mustache, and next to his right eye, he had a short but deep-looking scar that could have been made by a stab of a small blade. Stiff, bristly patches of white marked his short hair. His face had the look you see on people when they can't quite find the words they need. In his case, though, the expression seemed to have been there from long before, as though it were a part of him. The man wore a simple blue shirt under a gray tweed coat, and every now and then he would bring his hand to his collar. None of those assembled there knew his name or what he did for a living. He cleared his throat, and for a moment or two his words were lost in silence. The others waited for him to go on. In my case, it was a wave, he said. There's no way for me to tell, of course, what it will be for each of you. But in my case, it just happened to take the form of a gigantic wave. It presented itself to me all of a sudden one day without warning, and it was devastating. So the reason I highlighted this paragraph right here is this was the first time that I thought to myself, I wonder if this is a real wave. He starts with, a huge wave nearly swept me away. It happened one September afternoon when I was 10 years old. But if I look back to my Get Ready page, it asks me what the wave or the sea might represent. So that gave me a clue that maybe in this story, and I don't know for sure, I have not finished this story, by the way. It gives me a clue that this wave might not be a real wave. It may not be a literal wave that almost swept him away. And the real big clue that I get here is, in my case, it was a wave. He's talking to people sitting around in a circle, so we might start thinking about why they would be doing that. There's no way for me to tell, of course, what it will be for each of you, but in my case, it just happened to take the form of a gigantic wave. So I just highlighted that, and I asked myself, is this a real wave or a figurative wave that represents something else? And right now we don't know, but we have clues. The other thing that I highlighted on my own, and then we'll get to the question, is I didn't want to highlight this whole paragraph because remember when you annotate, if you just highlight everything, then nothing sticks out or seems important. So I just highlighted the first word of this paragraph, and I said this paragraph describes the seventh man in detail. So it doesn't really further the story or tell us anything about the events. It's just the author stopping, pausing to really describe this man, and it kind of makes you, or you need to get a picture in your mind, like it told us at the beginning, in the introduction, get a picture in your mind of what this man looks like. In his mid-50s, he's wearing a blue shirt and a gray coat, like a jacket. He keeps touching his collar. Nobody knew him. He has short, grayish hair and a scar on his face. That might be significant later on. But now what the question asks us to annotate, because remember in our questions, there's always an annotate and then a question to answer. Highlight details that indicate the seventh man is a frame story We learned about that on the Get Ready page. A frame story is a story within a story. So what details let us know that this is a story within a story? So this is why I highlighted, not the seventh man. I just was wondering, I didn't make a note on there, but it's the seventh man who's talking. But here's what tells me that it's a frame story. I was 10 years old on that September afternoon. If he's 51 now, or in his mid-50s, 54, 55, 56, and he's going to tell us something that happened to him when he was 10 years old, and it's called, well, it's called The Seventh Man, but it's about this wave, whatever that wave might be. It happened when he was a child. Also, it took years to find it again, to recover from the experience. That lets us know that a lot of this happened in the past. Precious years that can never be replaced. It's part of that as well. And then here he starts telling his story, which lets us know that it's a frame story. He's going back in the past. Now I want you to spend the last few minutes, you have about 5 minutes, those of you that are in class. Why do you think the author structures his tale this way? Why do you think, in other words, that he made it a frame story? So just to give you some ideas, think about why any author would write something as a frame story. Why do we have television shows and movies that start in the present and then they flash back to the past? What does that add to the story? So some ideas are, it kind of gets your attention. You want to solve the mystery. You want to figure out what's going on. It doesn't just, so what would be the advantage of making it a frame story going back and forth from present to past as opposed to just starting at the beginning and telling the story all the way straight through? So there's no right or wrong, but why do you think the author structured it as a frame story? And that's all you have to do for today. Tomorrow we'll come back and we'll continue reading, hopefully finish reading it, and I'll let you know which questions you have to do and which ones we're going to skip. Okay, so if you're a remote learner, you're quarantined, make sure that you watch the videos because you do not have to answer all of the questions, and I'll let you know tomorrow which ones we're going to do. All right, that's it for today, and I will talk to you later. Stay